And welcome to this Wednesday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you guys with us as we attempt once again to decipher the indecipherable and figure out which teams to play, where to lay our money, where to place our wagers on all of the activity, the sports overload that's taking place right now. Now, if you're a believer in conspiracy theories, I don't know how much that factors into your wagering equations. Conspiracy theories, the likes of which come and evolve out of almost anything that happens in the National Basketball Association. You would have to think, and this became cliche. You would have to think. They always would talk about this if there was going to be a bad Super Bowl matchup. Well, you know what? The guys on Madison Avenue, the network executives, Dick Eppersol is going to be jumping out of the windows of the 30 Rock building, the highest floor, if Indianapolis makes its way into the Super Bowl. Because nobody wants to see an unattractive, I don't know, nondescript small market team. If you're a network executive, you're trying to sell ads for millions of dollars per second. Do you really want to see some matchup, unless it involved a serious Cinderella type story that everybody had gravitated towards and got involved in? But more often than not, look, what I'm talking about here, the Boston Celtics have clinched now their path to the second round of the playoffs. I don't think that anybody anticipated that they were going to lose to the Orlando Magic. If you had Celtics in five, you're dancing to the windows there and cashing a ticket as if you were Red Auerbach lighting up a victory cigar. And Orlando, I don't know what happened. Did they even come out on the floor for the second half? If you were taking points with the Orlando Magic last night, you took one on the chin after it looked like things were so promising. It reminds me when James Caan was looking to collect from his bookmakers. He was surprised they were at his door looking for money after he'd been to Las Vegas and he bet a couple of basketball games and playing the role of the great Axel Freed in what is one of the classic, probably this is a Citizen Kane of gambling movies. The original version of The Gambler. You watch the Mark Wahlberg version, it does not have the same impact. Lauren Hutton added a lot to it. Caan was on his game. And the bookmaker comes in, and James Caan, thinking he had these games wrapped up because he was way up at halftime getting points, says they don't pay off at halftime, Axel. And that's what happened for Orlando Magic backers last night. They don't pay off at halftime because they didn't show up for the second half at all. Vanishing act, the likes of which we haven't seen since you were looking at some magic show on the Vegas Strip. And that was that. They get crushed. So the Celtics are in. And what do you think the network executives are hoping for here? Is there a possibility? I'm not sure if you guys subscribe to these theories at all, but if you looked at Game 4 and the non-call on the Tim Hardaway Jr. jumper out of the corner, two schools of thought on that. Some hardcore fans would say, you know what, they let him play the whole game. Why should they call that garbage at the end? Almost always you would see the home team get a favorable disposition in that situation. Would it have been hard to see the shove that was administered there by Hart on Hardaway Jr.? Maybe. The ref's right there on the sideline. So you start to scratch your head and wonder. They either have a chance to put this guy on a stripe. Detroit players on the money line are jubilant as they're salivating over the fact that they're going to be, what fine restaurant you want to eat at tonight, dear? And sure enough, no call is made. Almost immediately after the game, the head official, who was the guy on the sidelines, had a clear view of this, says, I blew the call. It would have been 3-2 to win the ball game, and Detroit would have gone back to Madison Square Garden last night at 2 apiece. A radically different picture would have been painted. Now, everybody's out there in force. If you looked at the crowd in this ball game, you had Seinfeld there, Carmelo's there, McEnroe, John Turturro played Kanish in probably right behind The Gambler, number 2 on my all-time great cinematic gambling depictions, gambling-oriented movies, would be Rounders with Matt Damon, brilliant, and John Turturro as Kanish. That scene in the Turkish bath, great line, too. He sees Matt Damon comes in after taking a beating from the guys, KGB, and the guys that he owes money to, and his face is all bruised up. Looks like a character on Prison Break. Turturro looks at him and says, what happened to you? You look like Dwayne Bobbick. Of course, one of many great white hopes that people lost tons of money on as well. But they go into the Garden, and in spite of the Tracy Morgan is throwing up after the ball game, it was absolutely fantastic. Detroit prevails and is now down 3-2 with a chance to even the series tomorrow night on their home wood. Detroit was getting 5.5. If I talked to one person yesterday, the only person I know of was on this show, Scotty M, who said he was not only taking the points with Detroit, but in an ever overcautious move, actually bought an extra point, laid a little bit of a price so he could get 6.5 instead of 5.5. It turns out he should have been on the money line as Detroit improbably won that game. But don't you think the phone was ringing in Adam Silver's office after the game? Is this an influence to consider when you're calculating how much money you invest in various point spreads that nobody wants to see? If you're TNT, they're losing the contract this year. You think they want to go out with a foul smell where instead of having Knicks Celtics in round 2 of the Eastern Conference playoffs, classic matchup that's going to attract attention around the country? I'm not sure that is it as attractive as Lakers Celtics. That's bi-coastal, so maybe that draws more. And you do have more stars there because the Knicks and the Celtics, well, the Knicks have more than their share of stars on their team. And the Celtics, of course, defending champion. Everybody that's connected with any kind of money-making machine that the NBA is hoping this comes about. So I don't know. I mean, does that factor into the equation that you would have to think after watching the result of Game 4? Maybe this sounds ludicrous to all you people out there, but that there was some kind of I don't normally subscribe to conspiracy theories, although when you looked at the Shedeur Sanders draft, could they really get all 32 teams to hold to a conviction that nobody should take this guy till the 5th round opens up? We're going to teach this guy a lesson. We're going to spank Deion's ego. And all 32 teams abided by it. And then as soon as the market opened up for Shedeur Sanders, Cleveland trades up and gets him with the first pick of the 5th round. I thought that would be impossible, but my good friend Len Robbins reminded me on a show the other day that you can catch on Bleacher Brothers. He said, look, they got 32 teams to conspire against Colin Kaepernick, keep him out of the league. Was he not better at any point of the time that he was exiled, which ended up being permanent, than many of the backups that were on rosters of some of these feebly quarterback teams that you see around the league? Everybody's quarterback starved. That's why this was a big story to begin with. But could they possibly have been in a situation where that the league had conspired and all 32 teams abided by the idea that they didn't want to take Shedeur Sanders to teach this guy a lesson? I don't know. That's more far-fetched to me than the notion that the NBA has a serious monetary interest in Detroit going down in a blaze of glory. Interesting, too. Detroit was always that team that when it came to the draft lottery, they had Elgin Baylor syndrome, where Elgin Baylor, the great Elgin Baylor, it was a disgrace. I mean, what a shame that this became more of his legacy than his tremendous play. I mean, he was one of the early forerunners of that wide open artistic style of basketball that flourished with Dr. J and Spencer Hayward and many of the others, Connie Hawkins, that kind of brought this back into vogue. Baylor was probably the earliest proponent of that style of play. He was fantastic, Elgin Baylor. But what a disgrace to have his legacy be built around the fact that on the biggest stiff show that you could possibly put on TV, other than the conversation, that LeBron James thing with Jim Gray, the biggest stiff show that you could put on TV is the draft lottery show. There's no way, unless you're the guy that is going to have his future decided by getting that number 1 overall pick. I guess fans of the team, when there's a Wembanyama out there, you want to win the draft lottery. There's some drama there. But when the Pistons finally were in a position where they got the number 1 pick, and Elgin Baylor, of course, was with the Clippers for so many years, and they would routinely get hosed every year. They would fall like 7 spots in the draft lottery, even though they were guaranteed to be somewhere in the top 10 and had every chance to be number 1 overall. They would routinely drop it, and it would show a despondent Elgin Baylor just slumped in his chair as if he had just found out that he was proven guilty of a crime he didn't commit, which it wasn't his fault, right? I don't know. Was he a bad luck charm? Was he somebody you didn't want to be around if you were betting horses at the track? I would have found him fascinating to hang out with, but seemed to have a little bit of a curse hovering over him, as did the franchise. And that was true of the Pistons. The Clippers, when they finally got the number 1 pick, who's the number 1 pick? Michael Olowokandi, a stiff. What is his NBA basketball legacy? It's not even as solid as Darko Milicic, who at least was in the league for several years and wasn't number one overall, although at number two before Carmelo and Chris Bosh and Wade, you would have to say that that was the undoing. I mean, you talk about damaging your legacy. Joe Dumars face down in the streets after he made that selection. That turned out to be very, very ill-fated, and maybe part of the doom of the Detroit franchise that put them spiraling in this losing syndrome. So, does the league want them in the next round against the Boston Celtics, or are they inclined to say, "Hey, you know what? We're far better served here if somehow the Knicks win"? Looked that way at the end of Game 4, and I don't know if that factors into your betting equations, but if it doesn't, maybe it's something to consider. All right, I had a lot of great action last night. Not one person I knew except for Scotty M liked Detroit in that game. It proves that they weren't dead yet. A couple of series, we had a series wrap up in the NBA as you had the Indiana Pacers coming back from the grave. Talk about a tough beat. Let's say you had Milwaukee on the money line in that ball game, and they end up in overtime, and they're down 8 points with 40 seconds to go. They come back, holy Reggie Miller, and they win that game. Halliburton, his old man, gets in the face of Antetokounmpo. That game had a lot of implications to it because you have to wonder how much further the Bucks go. Damian Lillard going to be out all next year, in all likelihood, with the ruptured Achilles. Antetokounmpo, disgruntled. He handles himself very well with a lot of dignity. I think he's one of these guys that you can relate to and say you respect the humility where he knows he's making $50-60 million a year no matter what. He's been loyal to the city there. But at what point does he start screaming, "I want out"? So a lot transpired there in those final 8 seconds of that overtime period. Boston, as we mentioned, if you had Orlando, they're up at halftime. They end up getting destroyed, losing that game by 31 points. And then the interesting series so far, and I wouldn't be able to tell you which way to go. I don't know that people anticipated this. Clippers were right there in all 4 games. They had the one blowout. Of course, Denver was right there as well, but found themselves down 2-1. And, 2-2. It was 2-2. It was even a 2-2. And Denver goes on the road last night and beats the Clippers 131-115. So that series has been tough to peg. Most of the wise guys, I'm sure a lot of money is going to go up in smoke that came in late on the L.A. Clippers because they became the darling then. Golden State was talked about. The Lakers we saw were vulnerable. And many guys that were inclined to try and make predictions about who would at least emerge into the Western Conference Finals to oppose Oklahoma City. They kind of like the Clippers. We're seeing the announcers on TV very favorable to the LA Clippers. And here they find themselves now facing a 3-2 deficit in Denver and for Game 6. Or no, yeah, they would go back home. So, down 3-2 in the series, 131-115. Denver last night. All right, hockey was kind of crazy. We had to close out Carolina, New Jersey. That was a wild game. New Jersey's up 3-0. Then Jacob Markstrom, who was acquired from the Florida Panthers, he might have been somewhere else before that by the New Jersey Devils, who weren't expected to beat Carolina. Carolina is always a cutesy choice to go and maybe make it to the conference finals, maybe even win the Stanley Cup. I'm not sure what the odds were going into the postseason, but had to be tempting to take a shot, as it is every year with these guys. They're well coached and perform very well, especially. I'm no hockey expert, but it seems like when they're 5-on-5, they're in pretty good shape. So they come back, they rally back, they tie the game at 4. Markstrom was a human sieve in the second period in that game. Players are dancing in the aisles of the casinos. And then the game ends up going to double overtime. And in the span between his complete collapse in the period 2, Markstrom makes 35 or 38 straight saves, many of which were of a spectacular Ken Dryden type variety. I mean, this guy looked like Dominic Hasek in there. He was fantastic. Plus, he's bigger than the size of the goal. So, I mean, that seems to be a bit of an advantage. But when do you see that, where a guy just falls apart? You might want to yank him. And he stays in there and keeps them in the game. But Carolina ends up prevailing in that series. So they move on to the second round. Vegas and Minnesota is now 3-2. Las Vegas, after Minnesota gave them a bit of a scare. Golden Knights win at 3-2 last night. And Edmonton, LA has been an interesting series. Scotty M, that's one place where he was getting buried yesterday. He always likes the LA Kings. Edmonton rallies from 2 down in the series. They were down 0-2 after the first 2 games in Los Angeles. Now have roared back to win 3 straight. So they're right back in there and contenders again, maybe. Some people like them to possibly even come back and get a chance to redeem themselves for losing in the finals last year to the Florida Panthers. Tonight, you probably have a closeout with Washington over Montreal. Florida and Tampa Bay is a very interesting game. Aaron Ekblad, outstanding defenseman for the Florida Panthers. He's been in and out of the lineup with injuries over the years. Recently was suspended for the first game of the postseason. Came back and acquitted himself very well. Looked like he was ready to go, healthy for the first time in a while. He gets kind of a revenge hit, you would have to think, on Brandon Hagel of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who had taken a knockout, vicious, dirty, ugly blow and administered it to the head of Barkov, Sasha Barkov, probably the best player overall on the Panthers roster. And was this retribution? I mean, a very similar type of hit, but Ekblad now suspended for 2 games. And that has to make a little bit of a dent in what Florida's able to do. We'll see if Tampa Bay can rally there, but they're down 3-1 in the series. A lot of people are telling me they think Tampa Bay is going to win tonight, so that makes me think I'm going to go ahead and stick with the Florida Panthers. They make a little statement that they're ready to go out there and try and at least make their way into the finals so they can defend their Stanley Cup. And the St. Louis-Winnipeg series resumes tonight also, where St. Louis has tied that thing up at 2-2. So the home ice advantage is held up, as it has been, very favorable to the bettors all throughout the postseason so far. I don't know that we have any great overwhelming recommendations in the games tonight. You have Golden State and Houston in the NBA. Seems to me Houston, are they not due to put on a decent performance in this game? Houston and Golden State, they've been right there. It's been a very contentious series in terms of both the physical play and the outcomes of the games. Houston, young team, maybe getting schooled a little bit. Steph Curry's been brilliant. Jimmy Butler's, when he's been in the lineup, has been his playoff Jimmy mode, not the sulking, whining pile of garbage he became for the Miami Heat as he literally destroyed their season with all of that drama. So not that I root against him, but I'm thinking, and this is the guy that gave you Heat plus 8.5 against Cleveland when they lost by 55. But I'm thinking Houston puts up a good battle tonight, somehow prevails in that game. I don't know by how many points. I don't have the line in front of me, but that's a lack of preparation on my part. But I think Houston bounces back in that one, makes it 3-2. And Minnesota and the Lakers. The Lakers get closed out tonight. That's a good question. Minnesota playing some inspired basketball. The Ant-Man wants to establish himself. Very tough call on that ball game. So I'll leave that one to you guys and sit back and enjoy it and watch it. All right, tomorrow we'll have Mike Jones with us. Mike chomping at the bit. Of course, he does the Big Gunner podcast right here on NoFilter.net. And you can catch his thoughts there. It's posted every Tuesday and hangs right there in the library that you can access. So always an outstanding job by Mike Jones. He'll join us tomorrow, and we'll have the professor with us on the Friday edition of the program. Our apologies, we weren't able to connect today with Troy West. He would have had this guy has been on fire, he says, and he does document his picks. So sorry, our apologies for not being able to bring you Troy today. But he got, I think, out there on the West Coast, he might still be out cold after watching, as we said, just a brilliant sports overload that we've been catching. First round of the playoffs, very compelling, both in the NBA and the NHL. All right, you guys have a great one. Good luck with all your wagers tonight, prop bets, whatever it is that you're sending it in on. We'll have more steam on the Derby coming up on Thursday and Friday as well. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.